Hey folks, guess what this is? Stay tuned and find out. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to discuss a very versatile knot called the dropper loop. And this loop is used to tie an inline loop within your fishing line or your leader, and it's used to usually hold lures or hooks or weights or something like that. So we're going to discuss this knot, how to tie some rigs, and the tool I use to tie them. Hey folks, so before we discuss tying a dropper loop, I want to discuss a tool or a jig that I built to help you tie a dropper loop rigs. This is very useful if you're tying a lot of rigs. It helps you do them very quickly and precisely. So if you can get a nice close-up, Mike. This is a board, just a regular board, and it measures 36 wide and 11 and a half or 11 and a quarter deep. That's not too important. You want enough space and you'll understand why. So a couple things here. If Mike, you could turn right here. This is where you keep your spool of line. These tools are here just temporarily. And I recommend getting a clip, just like a nice, very heavy clip that you use to close up potato chip bags or something like that to help you pin down the line. These patterns here are used to tie the actual dropper loop. This is a small loop and this is a bigger loop. And then your line comes around and basically gets pinned into, basically it's a large, like a refrigerator magnet with a clip that I just bolted onto the board, and that'll be used to hold the end of your leader line. So let me give you some measurements to start off with. Again, the board is 36 wide by 11 and a quarter deep. From the first screw to the first nail, oh, let me back up. These here are finishing nails. Basically, I just pounded them in with a hammer and I cut the tops off with the Dremel tool. Or you could have cut them off with a good pair of pliers and just sand down the rough edges so you don't get any nicks on your line. So these are very smooth, not cutting my finger or anything like that. So first measurement from my spool to hold the line is 7 inches. Second measurement, and I'll give you a few here. This one's about 6 and a quarter. This one's 9 and a quarter. This one's about 12 and a half. This one's here 17 and a half. And the last one here is exactly 31. And at this end here, it doesn't really matter the measurement. This is just about 8 inches off of the last finishing nail, just to hold your line and to keep it there. Now what I did, which I thought was a little bit different than the other ones I saw, and a lot of guys are doing this on YouTube, I bolted down or screwed down a yardstick. And I put a little piece of tape here because I can make measurements and take different notes on different rigs as I make them with a little Sharpie or something. So your spool goes on the end and we take it, we'll wrap it. I'm going to do this with a different kind of line so you can see it better, and I'll show you how to tie a drop. Okay, so for this demonstration, I'm using a Power Pro yellow braided line. This is not what I would tie any of my rigs with. I would use a high quality fluorocarbon. Here's a 30-pound class, probably 20-pound class for Fluke rigs, or even a little bit less if you want to go lighter, but I'd like to use fluorocarbon. But so it's a little bit of visibility, I'm using this yellow line, and it's from Power Pro to braid. So again, just for demonstration. So here's 2 different sizes of dropper loops. This is a smaller one, this is a bigger one, and I experiment with these. You can do any size. You can actually create a bigger one here if you wanted, for maybe tile fish or something like that. So what I'm going to do is come down and wrap this once. And now I'm going to come down here. Now, from the middle of this dropper to here, I know it's 18 inches. So if I put my dropper here, at the end, I know I'm gonna have where my weight is usually gonna go for a dropper lure rig, almost like a high-low rig. That would be about 18 inches. So I'm gonna use it and first clip it off here. Now, this excess is not important, I can cut it off. Here's the important part. Now I'm gonna take and wrap this line. If it's mono, I do it about 6 times. It says once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we take this line, come through here, through this loop, come back over the pin, wet your line. Now it's braid, so I don't have to wet it. And now tighten down on this. And there you go. That is your first dropper loop. Now on this rig that I'm going to demonstrate, I have a dropper loop approximately 18 inches from the end. And now if I want another dropper loop, I can simply move this measurement down. And if I wanted a small loop, which I wouldn't recommend, but let's say I want the loop here, maybe another 18 inches. I come around, pull this loop to 18 inches. Again, connect it to my clip, making it easy, and we'll do another loop. Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. Take this line off, bring it through, hold it there, tighten down on that line. And there you go. Now if you could see, that's a perfect dropper loop, about 18 inches from here and about 18 inches where I can tie this off wherever I want. So now I'm going to show you a couple of them that are done and some ideas on how to make a fluke rig, sea bass rig, a rig for striper fishing. Okay, before we move on, I just want to say we tied this last dropper. Now on this rig, I'm going to have 2 droppers about 18 inches apart. And at the end of my line, I'm usually going to put a swivel. So I can just simply measure 18 inches out. There's about 18 inches. I can take my pliers and cut this, what usually would be mono. I'm going to use braid. And now I'm going to tie my my swivel to that. Okay, so at the end of my rig, I'm going to put a loop. It's going to be a very simple loop. It can hold a clip, it can hold whatever you want. I usually use a bank sinker, or I use some sort of bucktail or diamond jig for my weight for these rigs. So just going to loop it, go over once, go under, one more time, under. Now if this was mono, it would wet the line. And I have a very simple, very strong loop. Now, on the end that meets your tag line, or your main line, I'm going to put a swivel. Usually I have all my rigs with some sort of swivel. So it's very simple. Put your swivel through the end of the line. Now, what not to use? What I hear is, tie the knot, you tie the best. So I go over, go through the swivel once, twist it. This is braid, so braid I would do 9 times, mono I would do 5 times. Right, so there you have it. Go back through the hole, cinch down on that, it ain't going nowhere. Okay, now that we've got our high-low rig done with our 2 dropper loops in line and our swivel at the very end, it's time to do my favorite part and play tackle box and dress this thing up. Now what I'm going to show you are just different variations. It's not precisely a lure or a rig that I would use, but I'm going to give you some ideas. So at the bottom, we have a lot of different things we could do. Let me play a little bit of tackle box here. And let's start with a bucktail. So these are some of my, just some of my smaller bucktails. So if I were fluke fishing in the bay, which, Mike, you want to catch that shot of the bay? A little rough today. We were winter floundering yesterday. We did not score anything, but anyway, let me get my rig again. Here's the end. Here's that loop that we tied at the very end. Put it through the bucktail. And everybody kind of knows how to use this. This is how you put a bank sinker on. You could put anything here that you would want. Okay, so now I've got the bucktail through. Bring it over, bring down. Now I've got the weight. So this will be my weight, plus it can carry some sort of gulp or a strip of squid if I was making a fluke rig. Now the second hook, if this was just a bucktail and a top loop, I may elect to put a nice teaser. So this is very good for fluke. This is also good for stripers. And if I just take my top loop, go through the teaser, here we go, through the teaser, around, and stitch down on that. Now we've got already a great looking rig. We've got our bucktail on the bottom, we've got our teaser in the top, and right there, that's a great fluke rig. Now to give you another possibility, if this was a sea bass rig, what I may want to do is just simply dress this with a hook at the end, and just put that hook on. Or, again, I'm going to play tackle box. I may go for some bling, and I may put on a couple of beads. I could put it on a skirt. So here, a possibility would be on the top lure, on the top rig. Okay, so on the top loop, we can put on this little glow-in-the-dark bead. We could do more beads. We can actually also do something else, which is kind of fun. And where did it go? This is my lure making kit. So you can see here I've got skirts, I've got eyeballs, I've got tubes. These tubes are really cool if you want to keep the line straight and kind of stout if you're tile fishing or something like that. So we could put on a skirt. Again, this is up to you. This is a little bit too much for my taste, but I could put on this skirt here. Okay, now we've got the skirt. So we've got a bead in the skirt. Again, not something necessarily that I would do. And finally, our hook. So we put our hook through. And now we've got a great looking rig. We've got our top teaser, we've got our bucktail, and we've got our basically a hook that we could bait. So there's a couple of ways that you can dress these rigs up, and I'm going to show you an example in a second. But you can use gulp. We use a lot of the small shads, or these are mullets, sorry, on the naked hook or on the bucktail. They work great. You can use the grub pattern. We showed you how you can use a teaser, usually on the top. Something that's really nice is an Ava jig at the bottom, on the loop, and your teaser at the top, and that makes a great striped bass jigging rig. I love these small epoxy jigs, Joe Bags epoxy jigs. Awesome on almost anything, but think about using them for sea bass. Line up your whole high-low rig with a bunch of small epoxy rigs, and these look like small sand eels. They kill them. Couple of rigs that I have made already here is an example of the Ava jig or a diamond jig tied to the bottom. On my first dropper loop, I've got that tube I talked about, trying to keep the line away and maybe from getting tangled up. And here I might just tip this with clam or a crab, depending on what I'm fishing for. The second loop, and this is again mono, this is the way it should be tied. I've got an example of the beads, and I've got a little plastic bait that imitates a sand eel. This could be fished alone or tipped with a little bit of a worm or something like that to give it scent. And again, at the end, your swivel. Last one is an example of a good flounder rig that we use here, our Fluke Rig. At the bottom, we've got our bucktail. In the middle, we have a dropper loop, an example of a skirt, and just a hook. Here I would put a squid strip. And again, our swivel. Now, you may have noticed I've got another tool here. I'm going to bring in Chef Mike so he can explain what the heck this is.
So you're not going to let this go, are you?
Nope.
All right, well, I had to bring my reinforcements in because I know the skipper's going to give me some slack, some trash on this. So I brought my good friend Willie. Willie, this is the viewing audience. Viewing audience, this is Willie, my baby boy. So a couple years back, I made this tool for Danny, who's far more handy than I. And I was really proud of it, okay? And the premise of it is when you're tying knots on to leaders and things of that nature, if it's mono, you take a little bit of oil and you put it on, right? And then you stick the hook here and you either pull it back with two hands or you can step on it, really cinch the knot tight. Good boy? Okay. Hey, here, Cookie. That's my good
Mike, why are you wearing white shirts all the time?
I'm a chef, Dan. That's what we do.
Okay.
Well, you're tough today.
All right, why don't you say goodbye to our audience?
All right, well, hey, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate your support. If you like what we're doing, ring the bell, subscribe, thumbs up, and we'll be back next week with more action from the tide to your table. Stay safe out there. Practice selective harvest. We'll be back next week with more from the tide to your table. Stay tuned.